Hi everyone, welcome to Type Talks. Today we have an episode with two ESTJ life coaches. And I find that life coaches oftentimes have a very inspiring story for why they became a life coach. I'd love for this episode to be a deep dive into your story as a human being and how that's made you into the person that you are today. I really want to have a series in Type Talks where we have a more personal sharing of people too, so that we can kind of see the humanness within everyone. And so, yeah, this is a good episode to go into that. And so, Wendy, would you like to tell us a bit about you?
Sure. Well, my life is just beginning completely over. I had been a stay-at-home mom for 20 years. I homeschooled my kids for 10 years, sent a kid to college at 14. But now in the process of starting back over, I'm going into the life coaching route because I spent 10 years learning about cognitive functions. I was married to an INFP for 20 years, and I wouldn't say it was a difficult marriage, but it definitely had its challenges. So in learning about our marriage, we learned about Myers-Briggs, then we learned about cognitive functions. And then in turn, I used that to homeschool my kids. So I homeschooled my kids according to each of their personality types. I had an INTJ, an ESTP, and an ESFP. So it was quite fun at times. But so now I'm starting everything back over, and it all stems from my childhood. I was terribly abused the first 5-6 years of my life. I had experiences where I would stand in a corner all night long as a kindergartner and then walked myself to school. I picked cockroaches off my sandwiches. I was beaten. I was molested, like the whole gamut of abuse. And finally, by the time I was about 6 years old, CPS came in Pennsylvania and removed my siblings and I from our home. And then I went into foster care, and then I was adopted at the age of 8 along with my brother. And I spent 10 years with my adopted parents. My dad, though, my adopted father, was an alcoholic. So I lived a life where I had abuse the first 6 years and then dealt with alcoholism the next 10. So long story short, by the time I could make my own decisions, which was 18 years old, I turned 18 in high school, my senior year, and I left home. And I just made the decision that I was going to change my family tree. There would be no addiction. There would be no abuse. I would not become a statistic. I absolutely would not become a statistic. That's so common for kids that are in foster care. I just wasn't. And by the time I was close to 40 years old, I took a class on through the police academy. I have a criminal justice degree from Penn State. So I went to Penn State and I got a criminal justice degree, and I learned the other side of everything. And it was quite interesting. At Penn State, I took a domestic violence class, and I interviewed my birth mother because she had been terribly abused by my birth father. And she told me in that interview, I had saved her life 3 times as a little toddler, because she would have lost her life if I wasn't jumping on my father. And so a lot of this plays into who I am today, because when you're abandoned in a way by your parents, and then you get another set of parents where it's just so difficult, my goal was to, when I was making my own choices, to make the best decisions that I could make for myself. Like, I was not a victim. When I could make my own choices, then it was on me to make the choices and have the consequences, good or bad, right? Because I haven't made 100% great choices the whole time. But I did marry my childhood. Like, I met my ex-husband when we were 8 years old, and I was put in foster care. And I told everybody in the 3rd grade that I was going to marry him. And then I did, like, because I'm very focused on my goals. But after 20 years of marriage, we just decided to go our separate ways, because ESTJs and INFPs, we share the same cognitive functions in our ego, and it's not always, it's a good camaraderie relationship, but it's not so good on the compatibility end. So long story short, I am beginning my life like over at the age of 42, 43. That's where I'm at right now. I'm going into life coaching and fitness coaching because I have spent 10 years trying to help people understand not just themselves, but the people around them. Because I just find that everybody sits and looks across the table and they blame the person who's in front of them instead of doing any self-reflection. And I've had to do a lot of self-reflection. I've learned a ton about myself, especially through this divorce and starting a business process. My kids had to learn that mom wasn't a stay-at-home mom anymore, that I was on a career path. And they've had a difficult time transitioning. But I have big dreams. Like, I go from changing my family tree, which I will say that I did, even despite the divorce. The INFP ex-husband, we are best friends. We're absolutely best friends. And so the transition was as good as it could be in the situation it was. But I now am looking at my legacy. So I'm just working my way backwards from 80. And what do I want on my gravestone? What do I want to be remembered for from other people? I have my whole, for my coaching business, the main goal of that, or the main reason I do that, is because I want people to understand that they're built a certain way and that it's okay. That it's okay. Because when you don't fit the mold of society, then you are outcasted. And I know this because I step into the schools as a substitute teacher, and you just have kids that are constantly pushed out of the norm and told that there's something wrong with them when there's not something necessarily wrong with them. It's just that they don't fit the mold of what is needed at that moment, which at schools, they're all run by SJs and SJ society. So you have kids that don't want to sit in their classes. Like, they don't want to sit at their desk for 8 hours a day and struggle with it. There's nothing inherently wrong with them. It's how they're built. And I always explain to people, you can't have a kid who's going to jump out of a plane one day. Like, that's what they're going to do, to sit for hours on end and do work. Like, it all needs to be revamped. And I found that out in homeschooling, right? Like, that's one of the reasons that I ended up homeschooling, was just because my kids, they're just little individuals and they needed to be treated like that. So my coaching business and my life just comes down to wanting people to understand how they're built, so they stop thinking that there's something wrong with them, and then helping the people in their life to understand that they are built differently than them, so that there's not this constant cognitive projection. Because people are, like, suicides at a high rate right now, and people are in prisons, and the schools are a mess. There's a societal problem right now, and a lot of it just goes from what people have been told about themselves and the difficulties they go through. So that's just the basics of what my life has been like.
Thank you for sharing all of that. There's a very big component of being like a phoenix, rising from the ashes and being able to be reborn in your own kind of way. And Wendy also has a podcast episode with Personality Hacker that I'll link below. And I'll also have her life coaching link below as well. And The reason why I got you two together is because you're both ESTJs, you're both life coaches, and you're both looking for ways to help people in the prison system too. And I'm like, that's very unique. And I thought I might also connect you both because you have that mutual aim of helping people, particularly in that way. And your stories also bring a tear to my eye too. So it sheds light into you can work with whatever you've been given and that there's always hope. And I think that's why you both became life coaches too. You want to remind people of the hope that is within them, that there is something greater within them, and that they're not just what they've been labeled as their whole life, that they can make radical changes. And you're both walking exemplars too. So that's massively amazing. And yes, so Charles, would you like to tell us a bit about you?
Sure. Wow, great story, Wendy. I think a lot of that story really resonated with me. And my journey, the journey that got me to where I'm at today, is very similar to the beginning of your journey as well. I grew up poor my whole life. My mom was a motel manager, so I lived in a lot of really seedy motels, which was good and bad. I met a lot of interesting people and learned a lot of good lessons along the way. And my mom was my adopted mom. She adopted me when I was 1 day old and she was 56 years old, which is a really fantastic feat. I mean, most 56-year-old women are probably thinking about retiring in 8 years. And this white woman grabs me, this half Japanese, half white baby at 1 day old and says, hey, I'm going to raise this kid. And she was undoubtedly the most amazing, loving, compassionate human being I've ever met in my life. On the other hand, my dad was a really abusive alcoholic. And this is my adopted dad, not the biological one. And I faced probably some similar abuse that you faced, Wendy, minus the sexual abuse, but everything else. He was mentally, emotionally, physically abusive to myself and my mom. And I came to a point where I didn't want to be around it. So around my early teens, I didn't want to be home. I went to the streets. And once I got to the streets, I found other kids just like me, kids who came from broken homes, who had alcoholic or drug addict parents who wanted to escape. And my dad always told me I was a loser. I would never amount to anything in life. So I never believed I was good enough. I always felt inadequate. There was something wrong with me. I felt a lot of shame. And being with other youngsters who felt the same way, we did what most people do when they feel these dark emotions. We try to distract ourselves from them with things in the external world. So it began with using drugs and alcohol at age 14. I later began selling and then manufacturing illegal drugs. And as I was telling Joyce before, I was doing it partly for money because we grew up so poor. My mom still lived in a single wide trailer. But the biggest reason I was selling and manufacturing drugs, primarily manufacturing and selling them, was just to try to feel good about myself, to get validation, just to feel like I was worth something and I did have some purpose in this world. And for me, that was really the beginning of the end, because eventually I got arrested for some drug manufacturing related crimes, and I served a 2-year prison sentence. And prison was definitely the craziest, most low point of my life. I went to Folsom State Prison, where Johnny Cash once played. I didn't see Johnny Cash there, although I think Rick James was there in the same cell block I was 1 year earlier. And it was just nuts. I mean, the first night I got there with some other inmates, we were walking to the dining hall and we saw an 80-foot long trail of blood. Somebody had just got stabbed. We saw bullet holes along the walls. And it was gunfire from previous fights and riots that ended with a lot of violence. We got to the chow hall and we saw a big sign that said, "No warning shots fired." So welcome to Folsom State Prison. And from there, things just got worse. I know, how does it get worse from there, right? I got a cellmate who was really crazy. I don't know if anyone's ever seen those prison reality shows with those big, mean inmates that are just covered in tattoos. and crazy. That was my cellmate. And the worst part was about 2 weeks later, I got some really bad news. I found out that my mom was in the hospital. So my mom, that amazing, loving woman that did her best to raise me, died 8 days later, and I didn't get to see her. And 5 weeks after that, my wife left me. I made a pretty bad mistake, which is get married 5 days before going to prison. And now she's gone. And I could just remember feeling just angry, bitter, sad, depressed, and really every other negative emotion that you can imagine. And it was undoubtedly the lowest point of my life. For the first time, I thought about just the purpose of my life. I mean, did I even have a purpose? You know, I had a high school education, no real world job skills, a felony criminal conviction. And I wondered if I even had a purpose in this world. But it was really at that low point, that lowest point of my life of falling into that deepest part of the abyss and being depressed and just questioning myself and my values, the decisions I made, that I slowly just started to get some clarity for once in my life. I don't know if either of you have read Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. I read that book, excellent book. I recommend to everybody. Viktor Frankl was a psychiatrist who was imprisoned in several Nazi concentration camps during World War II. And he talked about his experiences and how many people died, but the people who lived were the people that found some purpose, some meaning in their suffering. Is the people who were able to look deep into the suffering and what they were going through and see that it had a deeper purpose and that there was something in their life that was worth fulfilling. And just knowing that, just really think about my life and knowing that as bad as it is, that I still was smart. I still, even though I never really believed I was really good enough, I knew deep down that I could do something with my life when I got out. I knew I had some good friends and family members. And the big driving purpose, I think, was really just to do something that would have made my mom proud if she were alive when I got out. I think that was because I felt so much shame for getting arrested, going to prison, and not being there for her. So I think that was the very, very beginning of the transformation. And then when I got out, I faced a lot of discrimination. Nobody wanted to hire me, at least nobody that would pay over $9 an hour at that time. So it was a good time for me to get an education. So I went to college, had a lot of doubts whether I'd even make it through. And later I did. Fortunately, I found a really good mentor at community college. And I had a few people along the way that really saw something in me and inspired me to keep going and to get my graduate degree. So eventually, I got my bachelor's in technical and professional writing, eventually got my graduate degree in instructional design. And I got out. It was a long journey, but I had a really good career in technology. And then something weird happened around 2014. I'd look back at my career, and the first few years, I really started the career around 2000, probably around 2003, 2004. And the first few years were really good. But later, I really started to feel unfulfilled. I felt like something wasn't right, but I didn't know what it was. And I think it circles back to what Wendy was talking about earlier, and just trying to fit into that cookie cutter success template that life teaches you. So when I first got out of prison, I thought, okay, I got to first stay out of trouble and not cook drugs and get arrested again. Then I got to get a good education. I have to get a good job. I have to get married. I have to buy a house. I have to have kids, and I have to retire and wait to die. And I figured out that cookie cutter success template did not work for me because I wasn't living my authentic life. And that's really a big part of who we really are. And that's really a big part of the journey that many of us should be on, but many of us are not on. So I looked at that and I said, oh, okay, well, there's definitely a gap here. And then back to 2014, I applied for a job at a local bank. And at this point, I'd been in technology for a long time. And I thought, okay, I got this. They give me a job offer. But then a week later, the bank's HR department said, hey, you can't work here because of your felony drug conviction. I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa. Okay, I've been in tech for a long time. I've been out of prison 16 years. I got my graduate degree. And they said, yeah, but the FDIC insures our money at banks. They're not going to let you work at the bank. I could barely believe what that woman was telling me. But that was a turning point, because then I thought, okay, if this is happening to me, someone who's been out 16 years, has a graduate degree, and has been working in tech, what are the average people who get out of prison going to face? So that's when I decided to start doing volunteer work with this organization called Defy Ventures. So Defy sends people like me into prisons to teach incarcerated men the business, personal development, job readiness skills that they need to start their own businesses. Legal businesses, of course. And that was really the beginning of the biggest transformation of my life. Because when I first got into it, I didn't really know what to expect. I thought, okay, it's going to be cool. I'll get to go back into a prison and not worry about having to stay there. I get to actually come home later. I get to help some people out. But when I went into these prisons and I helped these guys, it was the most amazing experience of my life. Because when I went into those prisons and I looked at those guys' faces, I saw myself. Because I know how it feels to be in prison, to feel like you're a failure, to feel like you're a loser, and to feel like you have no hope, because I've been there. And just going in and helping these guys learn, grow, teaching them real world skills and giving them hope is without a doubt been the most rewarding work I've ever done in my life. And doing that work, because initially it started out as business coaching to help them with their business plans, help them with ideation, competitor and market analysis, how to market their businesses. That was the very start. And then later I layered some life coaching on top of it, but I never really had any training. But the more I did it and the more I liked it, and the more I found that this really is aligned with my top core values, this is really aligned with who I am, I eventually got more into life coaching. And in 2017, I went through a life coaching program at UC Davis, and I got credentialed through the ICF, the International Coach Federation. Just recently, I finally got off my ass and actually took the test and did it. And I don't think you have to get credentialed to be a good coach. It really comes down to your experience and your willingness to share, be vulnerable, and help others reach their full potential in life. So those are the experiences that brought me to life coaching. And to describe my coaching business, I have to circle back to the biggest lesson that I learned from being in prison. I learned a lot of lessons. I mean, that prison experience was without a doubt the best learning experience of my life, because I think that our greatest successes lie right next to our biggest failures. And so many people look at these failures and painful experiences and they just tune them out. They're so painful they don't want to think about them. But it's only through that pain and darkness that we grow. And for me, the number one experience I learned was that the worst prisons weren't the ones that were made out of concrete and steel. It wasn't Folsom Prison. It wasn't San Quentin. The worst prisons are the ones that we create in our own minds. For me, it was the low self-esteem. It was the shame. It was the greed. It was the negativity. Those were the worst prisons. And those mental prisons actually caused me to end up in a physical prison made out of concrete and steel. So with that in mind, my coaching business revolves around helping other people recognize and get out of their mental prisons. Because as both of you know, you're both coaches, you are probably familiar with the concept that most people are initially reluctant to even face their darkness, to face their mental prisons. They engage in what psychologists call experiential avoidance, or distracting yourself with things in the outside world. They want to constantly get on their cell phones, eat, drink, get on Netflix all day. They want to do anything to distract them from that pain that they're feeling here. So a lot of my business is really just getting people aware, getting them to set the cell phones down, getting them to be aware of those mental prisons, and then taking action. And also a big part of this is really finding out, like Wendy was saying earlier, who you really are, because all of us are uniquely suited for certain occupations, certain relationships, and certain hobbies and passion projects. Not one size fits all. You know, we have introverts, extroverts, ESTJs, INFPs. There's so many different people who have different paths, but people don't necessarily understand those paths. Many people don't even understand what their top 5 core values are. So a lot of my business, again, is just to get people aligned with their values, identify those mental prisons, and help them get out of them.
That was really well articulated. You both are extremely fluent speakers, like very talented, articulate speakers. And I find EJ types that tend to lead with either TE or FE. Some of them are extremely good public speakers or being able to articulate or teach or mentor people very well. And so, yeah, life coaching is very fitting for you both. And you both also have extreme internal drives to help people because you know how it's like. And so it's good because your extroverted thinking notices potential problems that could be happening to people, and you're looking for effective ways to solve it. And also, it's a really personal issue too. And I think it's really beautiful how you're able to take your pain and you make it into a lesson. You're able to show people that no matter where you are at life, you can always find a way to transform whatever pain you're going through into something beautiful. It doesn't have to be a prison, like what Charles said, that you can use what's happened to you to free others from their prison. So now that you know how to get out of your mental roadblocks, you have the key to your cell, and now you can unlock other people's cells with it too, because you understand that it's possible to get out, because you can't really get out until you believe it's possible. And so you are living examples of that possibility that things get better. And so it helps other people get out of that mental prison that they're alone and that they're out of resources. Because, you know, as TE Doms, you got those resources.
I wanted to just touch on the life purpose that Charles was talking about. So I had a different set of teenage years. So I had an alcoholic father, but what I chose to do was overachieve at school and I tried in sports, but what always bothered me as a teenager, like irritated me, was that I lived through what I lived through, and I wanted to know why I had survived. Right? Because there's plenty of people who don't survive. And when I say don't survive, I mean, some people they literally lose their life, and then other people do fall into drugs and alcohol and those kind of things. But I had escaped it. So I spent 20 years asking my husband at the time, I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. Just like with you, Charles, like why did I live? And then I thought I had started it earlier, but I took a class when I got closer to 40 at the police academy, because I was a parent, I was a homeschooling parent, I was a teacher, and it was a class that it was a different lesson each night for teenagers, like issues that teenagers face. So one night was drugs, one night was sex trafficking, on and on. One night was suicide. And what they made each of us do in that class was take that suicide like pre-screening, where you check off what if you had experience. So it was a page with 15 questions, and we had to answer, had we experienced whatever the question was asking. And so as I'm going down and reading each question, mine was check, 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 and on and on. And then at the end of everyone taking the this questionnaire, he had us raise our hands if we had 7 answers. And so people raised their hand. Had they been through the 7 of those experiences, and then 8, and then 10. I was the only person in the class that had experienced all of them. And he said to me and said to the class, you need to understand that you're lucky to still be alive because people don't make it through. And it sticks to me. It honestly sticks to me because I do know people don't make it through. I do understand that there are people that succumb to drugs and alcohol. There are people that commit suicide. This stuff is major. It messes with your mind. Like you were saying about your self-esteem and am I good enough? Who even loves me? By the time I was a teenager, the different struggles that I had with just parents. The message I got, just wasn't enough. I wasn't enough. I wasn't enough for my birth mother to stay, though I knew she left because of her own life. I wasn't enough for my birth father to clean up his act and change it so that our life was a good one. I never felt enough to anyone, really until I got married, and that man stayed with me by my side the whole time. But it was the first time that I had felt like maybe I was enough. So now I get to this point and I'm for me, Charles, yours is so helpful because when my adopted father, after my parents got divorced, when I was in college, he just being the alcoholic, he had no direction anymore. So he was in prison. So by the time I was in my 30s, I was visiting the prisons by myself, just going in there and checking him out and seeing him. And then as a side note, I had to struggle exactly what you were talking about, of trying to help him find a job because he literally gets out of jail. He's homeless. He has no money. He's got these felony drinking, DUI violation type things. And no one wanted to hire him. For me, so for you, I completely understand. I'm sure you're super helpful because that's a frustrating process. For me, the life coaching, as far as prisoners in that realm why I want to get to that place eventually as my business grows and I can support myself and then go do this kind of nonprofit work, it's because I want them to know they're a human being. They're human beings. And so when I said, I want people to know that you are a human being and that you have a whole life ahead of you. You really do. You have one life to live. You don't have to succumb to the demons in your head. Every single day, the sun rises every day. And you could mess up the day before and you can make new choices the very next day. I don't make perfect choices all the time. I'm constantly having to rework and rework and rework. But the important thing is that you keep moving forward. You can keep moving forward and you can change things so that they're better for you. I almost have this desperation. I don't wake up like this every single day, but it's this desperation in the sense where I live one time. And if I'm messing around, probably the worst prison I can be put in is God forbid I get older and I have a debilitating disease or disorder that puts me in bed and not moving. And I'm just trapped in my thoughts. And then all of a sudden I realized because maybe I was scared or didn't want to go out of my comfort zone, or if I was being lazy, that I wasn't going out and doing everything I could do. Like I always say about my business right now, or any of the different endeavors, I'm either going to be wildly successful or fail miserably. Like there's no middle ground. Like I don't want a middle ground, because I'm going to try as hard as I can to do what I want to do, because again, it's bigger than me. Like if it's not, I feel like most of the time my life is actually out of my hands. Like I make my choices. I do get up and I make my choices, but sometimes I feel like I don't almost have control of that, because it just seems like I get directed. I say a prayer daily. Lord, just put in front of me the people you want me to see, and like open their hearts. Like, because I'm just along for the ride. And at this point, my purpose is just to do what I'm supposed to do. Like I feel almost an obligation to take what I've been through, because I'm willing to be open about it and transparent. Just put myself out there and see what happens. And if I can help one person, 2 people, fantastic. Because otherwise, like you're saying about the cell phones, and we can waste an entire day. You can make your mind where you don't have to think about anything. And I love what you said about like feeling the emotions, because I can remember as I was going through this like last 2 years of transition, like I remember calling my ex-husband and saying, I feel like I have to wear every single experience and emotion like a blanket. Like I have to just let it absorb me. I can't walk away from it. I just have to take fear head on, joy head on, stress head on, everything in my mind as everyone's trying to relearn like what I'm doing in my life. I have to let go of what they think I should be doing, because I'm on a purpose now that's just, it's bigger than me. It's bigger than me. So a lot of what you said resonated with me too. Like I feel like there's a lot of ESTJs. We are just deeply purposeful people, and we can get a bad rap because we do go into like businesses and stuff like that. And we can at times act like super robotic, but there's a lot of ESTJs. When we go through hard times, we feel that pain. And so I wanted to say that, like, I did have a different experience than you, but for me, it was the same in the sense that it's a purpose now that I need to drive home and see where it goes, because it doesn't leave me. Like it's there all the time. It's overwhelming at times, especially when I put too much on my plate and I feel like I have to get it all done. But I think it's important that people start doing self-reflection. And I think it's important that people start understanding that what we say to each other and what we do tends to be very hurtful. It's the society as a whole has become very hurtful. And so so that's I just needed to make that comment, because I was nodding my head, I'm sure, when you were talking, and it's interesting that we both were adopted, and God bless your mom at 56, because I am turning 44 this year, and I am training for a triathlon right now, but truly I'm tired a lot. I can't imagine having a child, and like just what she did alone, many people would not step up to the plate and do. They just wouldn't. They would say, we'll just leave it to somebody else. And she saved your life. And I'm sorry you went through what you went through with your alcoholic father, because I didn't have the abuse from the adopted father. The alcoholic abusive first father, that was a whole issue, but it just mean the second time around. But even alcoholism is a trap. Like that's a prison for them too. And it's super weird. And I always feel like my problem is too, I can see in the future. I can project and see paths. I've taught my kids to play out every movie, play the movie out. And my alcoholic father, my adoptive father, I took care of him a lot. He had cancer and things like that. And all he wanted to do was drink. And so I was like, Dad, it's time to move. Like, it's time for you to leave my home. You're on your own now. And I told my kids, I say goodbye to your grandpa Bill, because I said they're going to find him behind a dumpster dead because of the choices that he makes. And sure enough, I got that phone call from Phoenix Police Department that they found my dad next to a dumpster, and he basically drank himself to death and died of like dehydration. So people, I just want people to feel like they're humans. But I do recognize, and this is what I teach too, choices. You have choices, and choices have consequences. And some of them are very harsh. And sometimes you just do have to live and learn. And even though I help people to see their different choices, and they can take, but I ultimately understand that they have free will, like I have free will. So you can do this, or you can do that, or you can do this, but it's your choice, and you do with it what you want. But here's what's going to probably happen with each door you walk through. And so though I can understand, I do get a little tough on some of those things, because I do want people to take ownership for their behavior, because I have to take ownership for it. We all have to take a level of ownership for the choices that we make.
Really well put, Wendy. And yeah, it seems like sometimes life, it has a way of stacking trauma together. So when you have one traumatic scenario, it leads you to many other traumatic scenarios too. I find that people who grow up in really traumatic scenarios, they grow up faster and they're more mature. Like you both have an extremely mature soul. And it also causes people to look at the consequences of their actions more seriously. So after all of that has happened, you understand the gravity that each implication of a choice has. And so it can cause this ability to foresee and to see, like, this is how things will play out. Because with having intense scenarios happen to you, you realize that everything carries an immense amount of weight and nothing is to be taken lightly. Because you have experienced firsthand that a small decision can have extreme consequences. And so it gives you this skill set, this depth of consideration when doing things. And so, Wendy, you talked about how ESTJs are very purposeful people. And I think that can also lead back to the introverted feeling in your function stack. With ESTJs, with FI last, they're going to have this set and forget relationship with their introverted feeling. And so they're going to have certain events, like when they choose to reorient their values and when they choose to reassess their values, they're realigning all of these values for like the extroverted thinking goal. And so they become extremely purposeful people because their values, they will live it out more completely or follow through with it more than a lot of people, because there's this purpose, and then all of their TE energy gets funneled into this purpose. And so the goals, the resources, or your ability to time manage or to plan, it gets funneled into this desire to help people. So it's almost organizing all your resources for that purposeful aim, which is beautiful.
And an excitement, like an internal excitement to get it done. I mean, all that energy, it's almost a joy to have such a purpose. It gets you out of bed every day. I said I didn't want to live a vanilla life where there was just, I woke up every day and just existed. I don't want to do that. I have my coaching stuff, and then I have my very personal fitness goals that I'm going after. Like my day is full of lots of learning and doing things all towards that purpose.
That's something you share in common with Charles too, the fitness aspect. Fitness is important to both of you. So I'll let Charles go.
Yeah, I think it's what Wendy just said about doing something that's so meaningful to you and so purposeful that it makes you want to get out of bed in the morning is really important. It reminds me of this Gallup poll I just read for 2021. It said that in the US, only 36% of people really like their jobs. So that means 64% of people don't like their jobs, or they think they're okay, but they don't really like them. They aren't excited to get out of bed. And that's what I always tell my clients is until you get it in tune with your core values and figure out why you're doing things. Why are you working this job that sucks? Why are you starting this business? Are you doing it just to make money, or are you doing it because it's aligned with who you are? Because once people start doing that, once they get more in line with their purpose and their core values, they can do those things that really get them excited about getting out of bed. So I work full time in technology still, and I'm still making that slow transition over to life and business coaching and speaking. And for my tech job, it's not the worst one. It's one of the better ones I've had, but I'm still not excited to get out of bed unless I say, oh, I've got some coaching clients later after the tech job. So I think it's getting people to really getting them aware and to realize that, hey, this life I'm living isn't the best one. In fact, if I take a deeper look at it, there's a lot of parts of it that suck. But the society teaches us this cookie cutter success template. And interestingly, sometimes one of the worst things that can happen to people is success. And when I say that, I mean, one of the worst things that can happen is they follow that cookie cutter success template and they get a job that pays $100,000 a year. I have a friend who started, he was actually a really talented dude. He got his master's it was an MBA, master's in business administration, super talented. And he got jerked around by this company that was paying him literally $44,000 a year as an IT project manager, which in California is unheard of. I mean, that is so low. And he had self-esteem issues, but eventually this guy was so brilliant. He took $400, started an online nutritional supplement company. And in 2.5 years, he scaled that company to revenue of $800,000 a month, $800,000 a month. He sold the business for $7 million 2.5 years later. And I asked him, if you got what you really wanted, which was a tech job that paid $150,000 a year, would you have started that Amazon company? And he said, no. So I think that's an interesting scenario, because sometimes when people get what they want, they shut the door on what they want the most. And a lot of times people fail in life, not because they didn't hit a goal. They fail because they aimed low and hit instead of aim high, miss, and eventually hit.
That is true. Yeah. It's sometimes we get in our own way. And sometimes when things don't go as we expect, we have something greater in store too. Just as Wendy was saying, sometimes when you let life be out of your hands, sometimes good things do come your way.
Well, some of the worst places to be is complacent. It truly, like, I'm telling you, like, that's what my ex-husband and I always talked about. We literally lived that cookie cutter life. I mean, it was a job. He has a high powered job, and I had the kids. I was the stay-at-home mom. I homeschooled. We had the house. Everything looked so perfect all the time. But the two of us were always, because I mean, an INFP, talk about someone who wants to live aligned to their values. That's 100% an INFP. So we were just always having that discussion. There was a stagnant part of our life. We weren't doing anything that fulfilled us at all. He ended up 2-3 years ago, he walked the Camino in Spain. Like, he did a 100-mile walk. And it was because I said to him, he was on the phone at work from work, and he was talking to me about different things. And I'm like, your soul is dead. Like it is. Like he loved me, he loved the kids. But like there was nothing ticking internally with just life. And I'm like, you need to do something. You need to do something. So even when we got divorced, the goal for the two of us, because we're both outcome-based people, was to go get a better life. And we even set up the divorce where he doesn't have any residual effects like alimony and things to me. And that was just my choice to not do that because I wanted him to go get a better life, and not be strapped to me for the next 10 years. I don't have an issue with I don't have an issue with it. I understand it. But it just means for me personally, the two of us, I needed to get things accomplished and he needed to get things accomplished. And we talk all the time about how now that we're separate, we're doing a whole lot more than when we were stagnant and together. And it's not really like a conversation about relationships, but just the point that complacency, it is just a tiresome, terrible place. You don't feel any emotions in that place either. You just do, or you just exist. You just say it's same. It's like Groundhog Day. It's terrible. I think it's terrible. It's fine to have it short amount of time, but overall, like I said, one time you live one time.
Settling is one of the things that get you into that mental prison, or it's a result of the mental prison. And it causes complacency. It causes people to live in lukewarm situations for a very long time. Sometimes your mind is really good at rationalizing away what your body already knows. So while your soul feels dead and your body feels dead, it takes a while for your mind to fully admit it to itself. It's like, oh, my life isn't exactly where I want it to be. But your brain it's structured to make you survive. So even if your soul is dead, as long as your body's alive, it's trying to perpetuate that, which isn't the best for your happiness. But it's good to know in what areas our minds tend to fight against us. Because ultimately, to live fulfilled lives, we kind of need to challenge ourselves, and we need to recognize when we're not in that space. While our brain and mind and survival instincts have the best interests for our survival, they don't have the best interest for our happiness or our long-term well-being. And so that's where life coaches come in, and we help people get more in tune with their inner well-being, or how to pay more attention to that, and how to not settle, how to not be complacent, how to not settle for the mental prison in their life, and to teach them that you can actually be free from the prison that is so familiar. Because when it's familiar, you think that it's all that you know. And so it's hard to see beyond that, because it's scary to look beyond the prison. But then when you get out of the prison, you realize how scary it is to be stuck in the prison for your whole life.
Yeah, that reminds me of this old parable of this kid who goes to a circus and he sees this baby elephant, and there's a chain around the elephant's leg, and the chain's attached to a stake so the elephant doesn't take off and run away when he's not performing. And then later, the kid goes up to this big elephant that's full grown, and it still has the chain around its foot and is attached to a stake. And then the kid says to the trainer, "That elephant is really strong. Can he just pull that stake out of the ground?" And the trainer says, "Yeah, he can do it anytime he wants." But that adult elephant has been so used to believing that he can't pull that stake out of the ground. Just like all of us are so accustomed to believing that we can't do something, that we're not good enough, that we shouldn't even try this, that we're too old. And if you look at that elephant analogy, it's almost funny, because at any time that elephant could yank that stake out, run through that tent, and cause some havoc that you'd see like on TV later. But it relates so much to us, because like you're saying, we're in those prisons, and we can walk out of them. But so many of us don't even realize that we can do it. We're not limited. We are enough.
Yeah, and I think it comes from anticipated pain. So when you're in the prison, the fear of pain comes from, okay, I'm going to go out of this prison and I'm going to mess up my own life in some way because there's no way that I can find any life outside of this prison. So the scary thing, or the thing that seems like it's going to cause anticipated pain in your brain, is getting out of the prison. So whereas like when you're actually out, you realize the pain is really staying in the prison. So it's all about a perspective shift. We're all trying to run away from pain, and we can either do that through what Charles mentioned earlier, experiential avoidance, where it's like, oh, I'm going to get rid of the pain through avoiding it. Or we can also get through the pain through going through it. So as you were saying, Wendy, the blanket, just going through the emotion, feeling the emotion and going through it and trying to fight for yourself and fight for the things that matter to you, or fight for a better life for you. It's hard, but a necessary awakening of the soul.
It's one of my business mottos, is that no one is going to save you. You need to learn to save yourself, because I had to learn to save myself. Nobody was going to help me. Nobody was helping me when I was young. And then even when I left home, I had to make decisions to make it. I'm going to make it. And so I want people to understand, again, self-reflection. You have to learn the tools to save yourself. Stop looking at other people. Start with you. Meet your own needs. And then you can start working. Don't spend all your energy on others before you need to take care of yourself first.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. We have to be accountable, take ownership for what we do. And like Wendy said, we have to save ourselves. I mean, if you look at the world as it is right now, there's a lot of uncertainty. I mean, the future of Social Security isn't even certain. A lot of people are going to get their benefits cut. If they retire at the new retirement age in 20 or so years. And COVID has really made a lot of people wake up and just realize how fragile we are, as human beings. This invisible virus has decimated, businesses, economies, lives. And at the end of the day, a critical part of our growth is just having high self-esteem, is believing that we are enough, that we can do it, that we have that inner strength to fight on this battleground called life. Because nobody is going to save us. We have to learn the critical skills. We have to learn the life skills. We have to learn our purpose. We have to learn how to live our best lives to save ourselves.
Yeah, no one is going to let you out of that prison. You can't wait for someone to go hey, you know what? I'm going to unlock that for you. Or look, there's a window open there. Go escape. It typically doesn't happen that way. If you rely on chance, you're relying on a very, very slim chance that you're going to have some magical event whisk you out of it. It's more of a personal decision on your part to get out of it. It's way more likely for a person to actually escape themselves than for them to wait for something to trigger that. Or there's something that triggered it, but it's the you who has to make the move, because it's your life. And I think it's a really good story of personal accountability or personal responsibility over your own life. Because I think the reason why people have difficulty taking responsibility for their life is because a part of the process is also realizing all the ways in which you may have also messed up your own life too. So I think it's painful to look at. If you realize that you've been doing something that you hate for so many years, you have to realize that you're also enabling that, and you're also a part of the problem too. And I think that's a really hard reality for any human being to come to terms with, that they had the choice all along, that they were that big elephant all along, and they just chose not to break it. That triggers an existential crisis within people. It's wait, I could easily rip this thing that was holding me back as an elephant. It's almost like it hurts, because it's you have to mourn or grieve all the lost chances or opportunities you had when you were before too. You're grieving the possibilities for yourself as you reclaim responsibility and accountability for your life, because you're grieving, I could have known this sooner. But also, you couldn't have known it sooner because you needed all of those things to give you that awareness too. So it's a lot of inner wrestling this journey requires.
Yeah, nothing is done by chance. And so, like I said, we get free will. And sometimes a lot of times what happens is people come into our lives and do things to us. But I always explain that for me, the way I look at it is I always worry about how I'm handling it, because in the end, I believe if I'm standing in front of God, if all that is true, then he's only I'm going to be there, like nobody else. And I don't even think he's gonna, just like I don't accept too many excuses from people, I don't even think he's gonna take any excuses from me when I say, but so-and-so did this to me, or this is what happened to me, and this is why I did what I did. And he's gonna say, I'm sorry, like you have free will and you have the choice to do something different. And so I'm actually not talking to those other people right now. I'm just talking to you. And that unfortunately wears on me. I'm really not always a fun person because so much goes on in my head. So much goes on in my head all the time. I wake up at like 3 a.m. and I start my day with pacing. I pace around the house to prepare to run. And I either will listen to music or listen to podcasts, and that's where I sort through all my feelings about things. Because I have to actually make time for my feelings as an ESTJ. No, that's not true. So we do get a rap that we don't have many feelings, but we do have a ton of feelings, like very deep ones. And if we've been through a situation, if you can get us on your side for your cause, we will champion it. And if we have felt it, I'm not going to say that you have a great partner by your side. I always tell, I only have a handful of people in my life that have literally reached my soul. And those people will never leave me. Like they have touched my soul, and they're going to stay there. And it's not everybody. It's like 5 people. So if you make it to that inner part of myself, well, you're stuck with me for a long time, like very long time.
I think that's a good point. Yeah, if an ESTJ believes in you and what you're doing, they will definitely be on your side. I mean, to just overcome some of the things we've overcome, we've had to get in touch with our feelings at a deep level, and to really help other people. You know, for Wendy, for you to be a coach, for you to be willing to dedicate your entire life to being a coach and helping other people transform their lives, I mean, it's a testament that you are in tune with your feelings and you care about their feelings too, because you've been through this shit. You know how it feels to suffer with an alcoholic parent, you know, to not feel like you're enough, to feel like you're alone and you're the only one going through this. I felt the same thing, and now I like to go out and help these guys in prison, you know. And I think Wendy, you said something earlier, is people need to know that other people care about them, that they matter in this world. Because there's not just people in prison. I mean, that's my thing, but there's so many other people to help. There's homeless people. There's people who are been discriminated against. There's people that are LGBTQ who have been voiceless, who haven't been able to get jobs, who faced, I mean, just horrible discrimination. So there's a lot of people out there that we can help. Yeah, and I do believe that ESTJs are firmly dedicated to helping, I mean, not just their family, but to helping communities and helping the broader world.
Well said. And so before we end off the panel, I'm wondering if we can quickly go over the functions. And so cognitive functions, starting with extroverted thinking. How do you experience that?
I experience extroverted thinking by getting lots of things accomplished in a day. So I'm very systematic. Everything has to be in a system for me. I have to take most projects that I have and break them down into different parts and then work my way through them. I have a lot of energy. Like I say, I start my day at 3 a.m. I end it at like 9 p.m. I'm not one of those people who does a whole bunch of other things when I'm supposed to be working. So I stay on task pretty well. I have a big attention span to keep going. So that's usually and my beliefs, like that TEFI is, together on an axis. And honestly, I will die on the hill for my causes completely. Like, what I like, because when you hang out with me for a dinner, you get it figured out real fast, because I'm not a wallflower when it comes to anything that I believe strongly in. So that's how TE works for me.
Yeah. TE is exceptionally good at resource management, time management, and has a particular organized, systematic way of getting things done. And they tend to set plans on how to achieve certain goals or certain aims. It's about effectiveness. So it's about external logic, using logic externally to create results.
I think for me, the TE comes back to just organizing my coaching schedules. I mean, not just making sure that people are scheduled properly, but I have a whole spreadsheet that has all my clients. I have all the dates set up, what we talked about, and I take notes during the coaching session so that I can email them later and give them a recap. Because a lot of people during a session, there'll be some really important stuff said, but people will either forget it because we'll find something else more important. But I think to really keep that organized, it's good to have some notes, email them a recap of the session and the things they need to do, the action items they need to take. So I think, my T function almost mirrors what I do in technology, because in technology, everything is totally, thinking, organized, methodical, repeatable. And when I can bring that same level of function into the coaching, and then later, add some of the other functions like, more human connection and feeling, then I can actually get better results.
Yeah. And I feel like life has really caused that integration of the feeling function too, so that you are actually very well developed ESTJs too. It's a good example, Charles. There is that stereotype with spreadsheets and TE.
I have them too. I've run a budget like every month for well over a decade. It's down. I'm a big Dave Ramsey fan, so it's every dollar has a name, and truly every dollar has a name at my on my spreadsheet. My kids have never taken cash out of my purse because they know that cash has been accounted for. And if it's missing, I'm like, hey, it needs to be on my spreadsheet somewhere.
It is a TE thing, but you don't have to have those traits to be a TE driver. Just the ordering logic in the external world is TE. So that's really good examples, the both of you. And so let's go on to the next function, introverted sensing. How do you experience that?
So introverted sensing for me, it's, I guess we'll call it it's my warning. I spend a lot of time thinking about how different things in the past will affect my future. And so I remember things like in a movie reel. I can go right back to specific events and remember everything about those events, like generally enough to give me an okay to do something in the future or someone else, or put the brakes on it. It's my self-discipline. I was able to train when I started running, I was able to train myself from like 10, 15 miles a week up to 70 miles a week and to train. So, and right now with the triathlon, the introverted sensing gets me out there every day in a very self-disciplined manner to get done what I need to get done for whatever it is I need to do. There's a lot of endurance in introverted sensing. You just kind of keep going and going and going.
Yeah, people who know Charles, like they describe him as like one of the most disciplined people they've ever met. And that's definitely the detailed memory is a part of introverted sensing. So you can still have a bad memory and be an introverted sensing user, just to have the heads up with everyone there. It's just that for the things that you do remember, they do tend to be detailed in the sense that the details do have significance because they tie into something. A lot of SI users do explain their memory almost like a movie. If you go back, you can replay it like it's a movie.
Yeah, I agree with that. Again, I'm not as familiar with the cognitive functions as you two are. I'm more familiar with the dichotomies, but I agree with what you said. I think for me, I definitely look back, and I think it comes across for me a lot when I coach, because my coaching style is a little bit different than some people's, because I do a lot of coaching the strict way, but I also go off that beaten path, and I use a lot of, like with coaching, you're supposed to just ask questions. I do that a lot, but I also do some storytelling too. So I think that comes across for me. And looking back at when I see somebody stuck, for example, this is a good example. If somebody is really stuck and I ask them questions, but they don't get unstuck, and I've been through the same thing, I can relate back to my experiences from the past and then say, can I tell you a story really quick? And then tell them a story from my past that relates to exactly what they're going through and how I experienced the world, how I experienced that and got through it. And I think for a lot of clients that are stuck, that really helps them out.
Yeah. And so because sensing functions are specific and concrete, they can take experiences, they can use them and leverage them to help with situations like Charles was saying with a client, because it's like, oh, I know something from my past that could help you. And other parts of introverted sensing too are sometimes finding routines that are effective and repeating them, and having very specific ways you kind of like to do things too, whether it's like the specific way that you might fold a piece of clothing or the specific way, particular way it's different for each person, right? But yeah, that's introverted sensing. It's very particular because it's sensing function and it's introverted too. And so that brings us to extroverted intuition, which Charles brought up. He has that kind of template. He has that kind of SI template, but then he'll figure out extroverted intuition, off-beaten ways to remix that template. Once he's gotten familiar with the template, he can then change it and adapt it to the situation, which is extroverted intuition. So I was wondering if y'all could talk about your experiences with that.
For me, it's a lot of brainstorming. It's again, yeah, going off the beaten path. It's my humor, 100%. That's the only time I'm humorous, if I get going in my extroverted intuition. But what's happened with me is that it has allowed me to see the possibilities for everyone. It's where the encouragement for people comes from with me, because I can see things that they can do that they're not understanding that they can do. So I help them to see that they can do these things. Now there's where it then couples with my introverted sensing is that it's not that everything is possible. We need to narrow that down into manageable steps to get there. But we can get on a path and start somewhere. So when I get into a TENE like loop though, because it's the first and the third function, very optimistic, then it doesn't always go very well if I'm not careful. And I don't use the introverted sensing, because then I have way too many ideas that I try to do at one time. And no one likes me because I'm really busy and I'm really trying, and my hands are in every single cookie jar everywhere. Trying this, trying that, trying this, trying that. So I try not to get in that loop, the TENE. I try to stay out of that loop long term.
I think for me, this this happens a lot when I do some career coaching, because there's so many people that don't know what they want to do with their life. They've been in the wrong career. They graduate from college, they're not sure what to start. So I think it's, for me, that function really helps me open up possibilities into what they could do besides what they're doing now. You know, for example, somebody has a really bad job, they don't like it. So we talk about other possibilities. What else could you do? And again, it sounds repetitive, but I think it's important. It comes back to their values. So we have to take a look at who they are, and it gets back to the why. Why do you want to do this? Do you want to do it to make money? Do you want to do this thing that you could possibly do because it's aligned with who you are, because you like helping people? Do you want to do it just because your parents want you to do it and you think this is what society expects from you? And I think just open up all those possibilities. And sometimes you have to think outside the box. You know, for example, if I'm talking to somebody that's been incarcerated and I have to help them find a career, we can't just follow that standard interview path. So if they go to an interview, normally it's, hey, tell me a little bit about yourself. I'm going to ask you some questions, give me some answers. So we have to look at other possibilities. And one being, right when you start that interview, tell them your story. Tell them that you've been to prison, but that when you were in prison, you actually learned some good skills. You learned later how to apply some of your criminal skills for good things. And the prison experience changed your life and actually made you a better person and made you want to try harder to get that job than somebody else. So I think for me, that function is just opening up outside the box possibilities that you wouldn't normally think about when you're in a tough situation.
Yeah, well said, well said. And that topic of values brings us to the last function in the ESTJ's conscious stack, which is introverted feeling.
Well, for me, it's why I'm doing what I'm doing. It's because I know that I have a lot to offer to others. I know that internally I'm a good person and I try to do the right thing. And I have developed over the years my values from my experiences. And so that introverted feeling, a lot of times it's what will make me feel bad about myself if people don't think I have good intentions or doing the right thing. But I know that I know where my heart is and I know what I'm trying to do. So I'm trying to overcome the insecurities of introverted feeling, because it's very difficult for everybody to overcome or work on that fourth function. And it's just so hard. And so for ESTJs, we do try to do the right thing. And again, it's not that we can't get off the beaten path, but we do try to do the right thing. And it's important for us, and especially for our TE, for other people to recognize that too. And I don't mean that in a pompous way, but I just mean like we are not robots. And so I've recognized that my introverted feeling has definitely given me a more human component to myself. I have a lot of sympathy for people. And I think it's because I've been through a lot of experiences, right? Because there's that difference between sympathy and empathy. And because I've been wearing everything as like a blanket and feeling all these emotions, I can feel what it's like to hurt. Like I can literally remember my own pain, how it feels to be hit, or what it feels like to be embarrassed about something, or I can just drive right down into those. So there's a lot of sympathy for people as they're going through that.
With introverted feeling, for the ESTJ in the last position, this is either the function that we neglect or we obsess about. And so there are periods of time where we may not be reevaluating our values as much. And there may be periods of time where we obsess and we try to like really, really try to figure it out. And it can show up in the form of as we talked about earlier, setting and forgetting. So it's like there are certain points in your life where it'll define your core values and it'll be set, and it'll just, every action you do is in accordance to that. I know a lot of TE users who they don't just have hobbies or interests, they're all just kind of leading towards a goal too. So, or they have a goal in mind with that hobby or interest, like something they want to reach at the end of that too. And that's a little bit partially due to the high TE and also the FI value of that goal, because a goal wouldn't be important intrinsically if you didn't value it. So it's a bit of that FI there too. And so thank you. I really appreciate you both for coming out and giving these insightful chats into your life, this raw, uncensored look into what's made you who you are, into how you can relate to both the darkness of the world and the hope of the world too. So you don't just talk the talk, you walk the walk too. And I really appreciate that about you. You're the real deal life coaches. And you really have a deep driving purpose and reason for being a life coach. And so it all comes from this desire to help people. And so extroverted thinking is a helping function too. You know, extroverted feeling gets all the credit for being the helping function, but TE likes to contribute too. The extroverted judging functions are all about helping the tribe or helping people, like externally more. And so you both do a great service with being able to help people. And I really think that it's empowering to hear your journeys, and that no matter how dark a situation is, that you can always make something out of it. So you can take lemons and you can really make some beautiful lemon pastries with it. You can always take something out of a sour situation. You're walking testaments of that. And you're also walking testaments of what it is to take control of your life too. So you're like, no one else is going to save you, like what Wendy was saying. So you really have to save yourself. And I think that's a really important thing. It puts the cards back into your deck, or it puts the ball back into your court, because now you know that you're the one who deals with the things that you can take control of. Yeah, and for the things out of your control, it's kind of already out of your hand anyways. And so you kind of make the most out of what you've been given. And so that's empowering. And Charles, with your elephant parables, they do signify that we put limiting beliefs upon ourselves, or we put these limiting assumptions on ourselves. And that if we just allow ourselves to aim for something higher, that we might radically change our lives in the process. And that dreams aren't just dreams, but some of it is actually possible. You don't actually know until you actually try it out.
I wanted to just say one thing to Charles. I have actually, and I don't know if you feel the same way, but I have found that my calluses are a blessing. As ESTJs, we tend to be very proactive, right? So if we're going on the trip, everything's set, everything's set. We have our itinerary, we have our safety kit, the whole 9 yards. We're very proactive people. In the game of life, right, there's people that go through with no calluses, but I feel like you need calluses. Now, so I can still remember a few years ago, like walking into the bathroom and going, you know what? I actually think I've just been blessed in my life. I'm blessed in my life. Not that I would like run around and wish upon people that they go through hard times, but I'm just saying that was my lot in life. Some of the stuff I went through was given to me, but now I have calluses, and the calluses just help you, again, with that introverted sensing. I know I can get through. Some of the things that I have right now just going on, or just generally, I'm like, I went through a lot worse when I was younger. Like, I'm older now in a much different position. So for those of you out there who have calluses, those are a good thing. They will help you get through life. They truly will, because you need to be tough. There's many times you need to be tough to get through the different aspects of life. So embrace your calluses. They're kind of like badges of honor, and especially if you make it through them gracefully. I mean, even if you're stumbling upon like along the way and getting through them, it helps you to get through life, to get through hard times. It's a difficult thing when you're doing it, but it's not. You can look back and realize that it's just giving you another layer, another tool to fight life with.
No, I 100% agree with that. I mean, and that is another core part of my coaching, which is that people should go through pain. Now, don't necessarily sell drugs and go to prison like I did, but you should go through some pain in life, because we only grow and learn and evolve into who we were meant to be when we experience that pain. We don't grow and become happy when we get massages, eat our favorite food, or go on vacation, or have our parents do everything for us. It's only when we make mistakes, learn from them, and go through that pain. I was reading an article one day that reminds me of what you were talking about, Wendy, exactly. You're a parent, maybe you could relate to this. There was a psychologist that was talking about how parents are doing their kids a disservice because they don't let them go through pain. They don't let them develop those calluses, as you said. And he was telling a story about a kid who didn't get along, a 10-year-old kid didn't get along with another kid in the carpool. So his parents pulled the kid out of the carpool and drove him to school themselves. And the psychologist said, no, keep that kid in the carpool and teach him how to get along with the other kid. Teach him how to live through that pain so he could develop those calluses, so he learns those skills he needs. He learns conflict resolution. He learns EQ, and he learns how to be a productive citizen. So yeah, I 100% agree. Yeah, becoming our best selves doesn't happen when we get the massages and make millions of dollars. It happens when we go through some shit in life and learn from those mistakes and come out stronger later.
And I would even further it to say that sometimes what happens is that you end up setting up your life that it becomes really comfortable. Like I said, like my life got kind of comfortable, and I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Like during COVID, when everyone was stuck in their houses, extroverts were going a little like jittery, and introverts were like, well, I mean, I can handle this probably more than an extrovert. But the problem we found in the schools and stuff is that you with social interactions, you need to always keep up the skill. So what happens when you get super comfortable in life, right, is that you no longer have like these hard times, but they're coming. Like you're not going to live the rest of your life and not have a hard time. Either you're going to go through it yourself or someone's going to put it upon you. And so I realized, I'm like, oh my gosh, am I going to have to go out and like do something hard? I almost have to, at times when life was going quote unquote well, it was like, I guess I'll train for a marathon and go just go out there and remember, get some calluses on my hands, because you just want to always be prepared for what's coming.
That is a really good message. There's a blessing from hitting rock bottom, because once you've done that, it can create a level of resilience and fearlessness. Because if you've already been through the worst shit a person can go through, then there's nothing much that can really be as bad as the thing that you went through. So now it feels like everything else is a minor little scrape or paper cut in comparison to the scars or the calluses on you. You're like, I can handle this. I've handled the craziest things in the world. Once you've climbed Mount Everest, then you're fine with climbing the bunny hill. It's like, listening to your stories, it's very heartwarming too, because it's a privilege and an honor to see your soul for a moment. It's like heartbreaking that you had to go through that, but it's also amazing how you're able to show that you are not your circumstance, like you are not your situation. You are beyond that. So you're a testament that you don't have to become what's around you. You can actually take a different path. There's path A, B, but there's always path C too, that you can create, the third option that may not be as obvious or as prevalent in your environment, but it is possible. So you're both path C, the other way. And so thanks for coming out. Thanks everyone for watching. I'll see you all in the next episode. Take care.
Thank you.